A sit-in protest by House Democrats lasting over 25 hours made headlines on Thursday this week, reminding some of the protests launched by Republicans in 2008. Meanwhile, a bipartisan bill that would give the Justice Department more leeway in denying those on the no-fly list from purchasing a firearm won a majority vote, but not enough to officially move forward. David, a lot of wacky stuff in Washington, in both the House and the Senate, sit-ins, everything else. Take your pick from what you saw this week.
Well, that bipartisan bill you mentioned was sponsored by Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas, and it did get a majority, but a Democratic filibuster, and it got, as you said, it got Republican and Democratic votes, but it didn't get all the way to 60. But a Democratic filibuster prevented that from passing, because you need 60 to invoke cloture, which is an example of how this is not a serious issue, except in the political sense. The Democrats wanted to keep this as a political issue because they think it will help them in November, like in 1999 after Columbine, when Congress was ready to pass some restrictions on gun shows, but the Democrats and the Clinton White House kept saying, "Oh, no, nothing you can ever give us is ever going to be enough. We will refuse to accept anything you want to do, so we can have the issue around for the next election." In the House of Representatives, there is a procedure if you're a member of the minority party and the majority party isn't bringing up some bill you want. You can have something called a discharge petition. You get 218 signatures on it, which shows you've got the votes to pass it on the floor of the House. And by the rules of the House, that's how you bring something out. And it's been used successfully a variety of times. The rules of the House don't have this temper tantrum sit-in procedure. This is one of the ways where the Democratic leadership in the House is in full alignment with Donald Trump in moving to turn this country into a banana republic. It is disgraceful that Ed Perlmutter, former majority leader of the Colorado Senate, who was a very effective majority leader, a good legislator, and has been his whole career a very serious legislator, participated in this grotesque stunt. And again, something for it's going to fire up their base. They were fundraising over it while it was going on. It's not something serious about trying to actually prevent terrorist attacks. The terrorist in Orlando passed many background checks, including being a licensed security guard for a company, Wackenhut, which is now called D4S, which is a contractor for the Department of Homeland Security. So there's not more background checks that would have done something about Orlando. And what they're fighting for is now they're having sit-ins against civil rights. They want to say that if somebody at the FBI secretly puts you on a list, then they can make it a felony for you to exercise your civil rights. That is not a principle that, if that ever gets established in our law, is going to be limited to the Second Amendment, which I understand they hate that. But President Trump is going to take that principle and apply it in lots of other contexts. And if it's not President Trump, then you'll have some other guy who will do it and abuse it. Martin Luther King used to be a gun owner who was on an FBI list.
Eric, it seemed to me that Democrats have a lot more to gain from publicity than GOP might be losing. But it's late June. The attention span of the national voter isn't terribly long. Do people remember this sit-in in November?
I think some remember this sit-in. Politics these days is basically theater, which is why Trump has risen, because he is basically an actor. And as theater goes, this was pretty good theater. It was compelling. It brought the cameras there. It fired up the social media. To me, it is all testimony to the dysfunction of Washington, that basically we now have government by theater, and we have candidates who, on a daily basis, try to jump to theatrics. David is right in the sense that this has everything to do with November. This is not about forcing a vote in the House. I'm not sure that the Democrats actually really want or expect to vote. This is not about a specific bill. This is all a November strategy. Whenever an incident happens, as tragic as that was in Orlando, as a country now, we immediately go sprinting to our respective corners. And if you're of left of center mind, your corner is gun control. And if you're of right of center mind, your corner is probably immigration policy. And there's very little dialogue between those corners. There's very little dialogue between camps. I find the whole thing distressing. I thought it was effective theater. Did it move the ball forward? In a political sense, yes, but not in a substantive dialogue sense.
Susan, do you think House Democrats or even Senate Democrats are looking to turn the events from this week into more action down the road?
I hope so. I agree with Eric. It was theater. I think it was effective theater. But let's be clear, Democrats also have obstructed gun control for years and even decades. And what's changed this year, not just because of Orlando, but because of what's coming out of Hillary Clinton's mouth, I mean, suddenly she is harnessing and embracing this outrage about gun violence. I think the next step beyond this measure, which this no-fly list, no gun thing, really would not have prevented this catastrophe from happening and many others, is the question of how serious are they willing to get? And what we know works isn't about no-fly lists. What we know works is much more about policing on the ground. It's about identifying the 1 or 2% of at-risk males in cities who are committing gun violence. It's about taking guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. It's about limiting high-round magazines. We know those things work. On the 1 to 2% of high-risk males, that's a tough thing to do in this country. There's so much bad faith between police and communities of color that it's very hard for police to get into these communities and convince the communities, yes, you need buy-in on this. We want to go after these 1 to 2% of at-risk males, and for the communities to embrace that requires a lot of reconciliation and a lot of sort of discussion that has not happened either in the presidential race or really in the Obama administration. So I hope that something does happen in the next 4 months. I sort of doubt that it will.
Patty, I think we know where dyed-in-the-wool the Democrats believe how the sit-in went and how Republicans felt. But when you look at the independents, both in Colorado and the nation, who decide the elections, how do you think they respond to seeing the events from this week?
I think they would have preferred to see the Democrats go sit in at the FBI headquarters and Homeland Security, where if they had done their job really vetting the killer, they would have found out a lot of things. There were warnings. There was one person who wouldn't let him go on a security force. There were plenty of warnings out there. Well, however you feel about guns aside, there were warnings that we should have caught this guy. It's a topic we could talk about for another 25-hour sit-in, but I just think it was too much theater, not enough substance. We'll be talking about guns plenty, though, with Hillary's position, with Trump meeting with the NRA. There will be no shortage of discussion.